By the way, speaking of Putin, Kadyrov disappeared, but Putin has vanished too. And this is really stirring up the internet right now. Well, first of all, there's this strange story with the congratulation with the color of the tie. There's a theory that it wasn't even a double or a triple or a udmurt, but that artificial intelligence wrote it and created this Putin avatar. And Putin is completely absent from the public sphere right now. You say Kadyrov is shown for a second and a half, 2 quick shots, 3 claps, and that's it. On Russian television, something completely bizarre aired. An absolutely mind-boggling story. A child in kindergarten seems to be talking to Putin via video call, but only Putin's voice is present on the call. They don't even show a live Putin. What is this about? Is it more plastic surgery, a bender, Russian, traditional, New Year's, or could there be something else behind this?
Well, a bender doesn't fit at all, because Putin doesn't drink. And because of that, by the way, he's not a very good person, because a good person can't not drink. That's another matter. There could be different...
Oh, in which particular soul, I must genuinely ask? I am truly, truly, deeply sorry.
Of course, this is connected to several things at once. That is, first of all, it's plastic surgery, without a doubt, because lately he has been looking rather bad. On one hand, his face has been heavily retouched. And on the other hand, he has a lot of accumulated problems, because after all, he's an old man. That's why he has problems with his teeth. He has kidney problems. He has prostate problems. He's got problems with just about everything. No, for a man over 70, even in developed countries, though in developed countries they do not hide it. There they simply put someone in a clinic and the person says, yes, for a while I will be out of commission, so to speak, because I have some medical issues. But Putin can't show that. He's supposed to be eternal. He doesn't even wear glasses, for example, even though his eyesight is really bad. They print things for him in large letters, all that sort of thing, and so on. And he wears contact lenses to look younger, because he thinks that if he puts on glasses, people will say, that's it, he's an old man, and so on. Although when he walks, it's already obvious to everyone that he's an old man. In other words, his walk has been that of an old man for a long time now. That is, it's already been...
several years, like an old man on stilts. And we've discussed this with you more than once already. Yes. And how much more overgrown it was back then.
I think, by the way, that it's not out of the question. Even some kind of, I was going to say, plastic surgery. And instead of Putin, it'll be Patrushev who comes out. And so they'll swap places, and Patrushev, on the contrary, will come out in Putin's place. Because, as you see, Valery Dmitrievich Solovey told us that Patrushev made a deal with Trump, gave up Venezuela, and so on. Although all of this is absolute nonsense. Yes, complete nonsense. By the way, Patrushev has also been gone for a long time. The very last time he was seen, he was giving Putin some kind of minor medal, and after that, Patrushev disappeared completely from the public eye. He hasn't even shown up at events where he's supposed to be present, like as an advisor on shipbuilding when they were launching some boats, submarines, and so on. So, of course, they have medical problems. Putin definitely does, without a doubt. Plus, he's a Sybarite. He actually doesn't really like to work, prefers to just relax. He wound up all these loose ends. I mean, after all, he was quite actively working from October to December. We saw him almost every day at some meeting or another. One particular day, he conspicuously puts on a standard supermarket worker's smock and then proceeds to meet with the high-ranking military officials. Subsequently, he travels to a different location where he delivers several important speeches articulating various significant points or other relevant statements. And then he tells you, well, I have to be there. Maybe for once he went somewhere to ski, but he can't go to Courchevel anymore. So he went somewhere else. He can't even go to Sochi, he's afraid. So maybe he went to the Urals, somewhere like that.
Well, I guess we'll be seeing even less of him now because, let's be honest, phobias. He already had more than enough of them. But even more were added after the Venezuelan operation, which even the laziest person, unless they were the only one who didn't discuss it, but I want to discuss it. Did it add more fears for Putin? I think so, because Dima Medvedev, whom we've already mentioned, served as a vivid indicator. I can even quote for you what this perpetually drunk creature spewed out. Look, he said that after the events in Venezuela, he could imagine a similar scenario of a leader being seized in other countries, specifically Friedrich Merz. The abduction of that same neo-Nazi Merz could make for a great plot twist in this carnival-like series. At this point, there's little left that can surprise anyone. There's a certain degree of realism here, Berger and so on, and then he started throwing around threats mixed with insults. What do you think? Did the Kremlin even flinch at what happened in Caracas? Well, in particular, characters like Medvedev and Putin.
I don't think they flinched in the sense that they might be kidnapped. Trump isn't planning to kidnap Putin. Why would he need to kidnap him? He can always be summoned to Washington. He'll always be ready to go anywhere Trump tells him to, just like he rushed to Alaska when Trump told him to. And besides, after all, Medvedev didn't just randomly write that nuclear weapons are a deterrent. He immediately wrote that this is something you can only allow yourself to do with countries that don't have nuclear weapons. As for states that have nuclear weapons, they don't fall under this category. These are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. They have the privilege of veto power at Security Council meetings, but also the privilege of not being abducted by competitors. Here, I really think they have nothing to fear. They're different. It was a blow because, you see, Valery Dmitrievich Solovey claims there was an agreement, but in reality there was no agreement at all. That's exactly the problem for Putin and his entire regime. Trump simply took Venezuela from them without giving them anything in return. In other words, he just took that piece away from them. And there is no agreement at all, like you let me do as I please in Venezuela, and I let you do as you please in Ukraine. No way, not even close. On the contrary, that's exactly what it's about. So they're in shock that Trump, such a bad guy, just took a juicy piece from them, and Venezuela is a huge prize. It has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. That's 300 or 305 billion barrels. Potentially that can be extracted, plus next to Guyana, where the United States is already making their presence felt as much as they can. So, plus Venezuela is a large country in Latin America, and above all in South America. It's a very symbolic thing because they killed Cubans there, and the Cubans howled about it. So they held a mourning here. They said, you see, we've been trampled on and so on. In other words, basically, Trump told them bluntly that you could be next. Though it's not interesting with you because there's nothing to take from you. Cuba is an absolutely impoverished country, which has been decaying for many decades because it used to just leech everything from the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union disappeared, well, Russia, by the way, Putin's Russia gives them very little. And Cuba itself used to be a real tourist gem. In other words, it basically has nothing else except its tourism potential. But in order to become a tourist paradise, you need to completely redevelop the entire coastline. But with Trump, they could have come to an agreement. You know, it's like when someone suggested the idea that America could take Gaza and turn it into the pearl of the Mediterranean, and so on and so forth. Kumba could have made a deal with America in exactly that way. That is, she could have said, we take back everything we said. Enough of this communism. We're becoming an American appendage. But we want to live, so to speak, in comfort, because this would simply be a paradise for American tourists. They would build a huge number of hotels here. It's all very close to America. It's convenient. It's nice. It's warm. It's beautiful. So basically, if you were to redevelop all of Cuba, it would be a huge, highly desirable piece of real estate. Just imagine how much could be made. If we're talking about gas, that's just a few square kilometers in the dozens. But Cuba is still a big island. Just imagine how much could be built there. There could be haciendas, 5-star hotels, 4-star hotels. There's almost nothing you couldn't build there. Because Cuba will never be able to do anything else. It will never work out. They don't know how to work. They don't want to work. And so basically they languish in their poverty, stuck in their sluggish communist ideology, because it has shown that in reality they can't accomplish anything, but at the same time they don't want to give up their principles either. That's why they prefer to live in poverty and beg. Somewhere, somehow, they still have some fairly strong ones left. Sometimes it's the intelligence services, because even Maduro was guarded by Cubans and his repressive apparatus was organized by them. The Cubans. So that's the story with Latin America. And Putin lost all of that because, in fact, 2 years ago, Patrushev made a special trip around Latin America. He went to Cuba, to Nicaragua, and to Venezuela. Basically, he traveled through Cuba and then to Nicaragua. And in Nicaragua, he gathered 5 countries that wanted to immediately align themselves with Russia. So you also have to add Bolivia, Peru, and maybe Bogota to that list. And basically, they claimed that the Russian Federation should control Latin America in defiance of America, in defiance of the United States of America. Under Trump, all of that fell apart. All of those. So Patrushev's wet dreams, well, Patrushev himself hasn't really been the main ideologue for a long time now. But those who remained after him, they still have those wet dreams. Because, by the way, Solovey himself was saying that Prigozhin didn't actually die, but is in fact in Venezuela, bathing his tired feet in wonderfully warm waters and leisurely drinking all sorts of delicious cocktails, including refreshing margaritas, with many beautiful and captivating women, Latin American women. But there really were very serious connections there, military ones. The Russian Navy would regularly dock there. At that time, they were supplying and selling weapons, some kind of weapons. And there was a huge amount of drug trafficking going through Venezuela, organized, among other things, with the help of the Russian Federation, which partly transported it to Africa and from Africa onto Europe and so on. So in reality, Russia lost a very significant piece, and that left them stunned. And it happened mainly because they simply lost it without getting anything in return. Putin, in fact, even before all this happened, if you pay attention here, Trump as well, after all, this operation was planned for December 25th. But on December 25th, Putin was still somewhere out there doing something. He was, appearing on TV. But as soon as he disappeared from TV, went underground somewhere. Well, roughly speaking, they called Trump and told him, that's it. The guy is under anesthesia. And he said, well, so shall we go ahead? Then we'll move the start of this operation to January so that Putin can't do anything, because God forbid, if he could somehow, well, I don't think he would have gone out there to storm any barricades or started saying something to Trump. But you see, on the other hand, he didn't even comment on it. He hasn't even made a statement anywhere in writing yet regarding the situation with Maduro. Vasily Benzi spoke on his behalf at the Security Council. He said that all of this is a violation of international law, which indeed is a violation of international law. There's no doubt about that. But it's another matter that Vasily Benzi himself should have been asked, where were you when Putin attacked Ukraine? Because that's just as much a violation of international law. And if you're for international law, then get out of Ukraine, return all the occupied territories, and then maybe we can talk with you about whether we will stand in solidarity with this same Maduro.